Let's speak to Greg Knight, though. He's the CEO of JenningsBet, because a lot of people are worried about the likelihood that Rachel Reeves is going to, in her quest to try and get even more money into the exchequer, that she's basically going to raise gambling tax and make it much more expensive for people to make bets, make it much more expensive for people who run betting companies to make a living. Nobody probably will have too much sympathy with them. However, it's a thriving business in this country, and another one which Rachel Reeves would like to damage. Let's find out what Greg says about all of that. Greg, a very good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Mike.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much indeed. We're hearing that Betfred might basically close all of its shops if Rachel Reeves goes ahead with this gambling tax hike. What's your situation? What's your position on this? Well,
I'm in a similar situation to Betfred, in that my core business is running high street betting shops.
Yeah.
I think it's important to understand at this point that there's a world of difference between online gambling and, you know, high street gambling, betting shops to you and I. And the government has acknowledged that. It actually started a consultation last year on the tax treatment of online gambling. And that was making its merry way. And what's changed is, I mean, it pointed out at that point that specifically didn't want to look at high street betting shops.
Right.
It acknowledged they were different, and they were different because they pay business rates, they employ lots of staff in the UK, and they contribute an awful lot to local economies and central government. The problem is, and what's changed is, that Gordon Brown has come along with his think tank and you know, sees gambling taxes as an easy win.
Right.
But by default has dragged betting shops into the conversation, and now they form part of what may be considered by government, and that's what scares us.
Yes. And the figures that they're talking about are something like an increase on sports betting from 15 to 30%, and on machine and online slots from 20 to 50%. So where do you fall in that sort of category?
Well, we would be affected by any raise in sports betting taxes.
Yeah.
And any raise in machine gaming taxes. You see, we are already taxed differently from online. There's already a distinction between the two. But we would be dragged in on both of those taxes. If you're talking about the levels there that you've just mentioned,
right.
It is without exaggeration to say that the whole of, you know, the UK's betting shops would close.
Yeah.
Now, there's 40,000 jobs there. And even more importantly, or just as importantly, the horse racing industry is funded, 40% of its funding comes from UK betting shops.
Yeah.
They employ something like 80,000, and then hundreds of thousands when you think of the ancillary industries.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about betting shops closing. Some people might think, oh, good job. But the fact is, we are major contributors to the UK economy.
Right. And also to the exchequer as well, because a lot of those people paying tax, income tax, you know, that's going to be a lot of money, isn't it?
Listen, absolutely. But my company, Mike, paid more in gambling taxes last year than I made in profit. So we talk about fair share. That's definitely a fair share.
Right.
In fact, in my opinion, it's more than a fair share. But we are where we are. My real worry is that this is almost as an afterthought. Well, look, let's just chuck betting shops in. We might get an extra few quid. Just by way of context, there were 8,500 betting shops in 2019. There are now 5,900. So you get to a pivot point with any industry. If you keep taxing it, you get to a point where you start to come down the other side, and it tips, and your revenues are actually reduced. We are at that point now.
Yeah.
You know, that's evidenced by all those closures. So I think Treasury need to understand the difference and the huge ramifications here. Empty shops, boarded up shops, people out of work. The problem is people always gamble, Mike. They always have done, and they always will do. And shutting betting shops won't stop that. It'll just push that underground.
And they'll always find a way to do it. Greg, I wish you well. Thank you very much indeed. Greg Knight, the CEO of JenningsBet, they're saying last year they paid more in gambling tax than they made in profit. But yet Rachel Reeves wants to tax them even more. Extraordinary.